Nothing on the Bonnell Foundation's Living with Cystic Fibrosis podcast should be considered medical advice. Medical advice can only come from your CF physician. Cystic fibrosis can be a devastating diagnosis, but living with the disease can bring positivity and a new appreciation for each day. From the Bonnell Foundation in Detroit, Michigan, it's the Living with Cystic Fibrosis podcast, sponsored by Viatris and Genentech. Here's your host, Laura Bonnell.
As we wrap up Pride Month, we have a lovely story to tell you. It's Wes Hawkins' story. All of us at the Bonnell Foundation know there are many people with cystic fibrosis that are in the LGBT PLUS community. I saw a post by Wes on Facebook. He shared his CF journey and his coming out story. And I wanted to share his story on our podcast. Wes is 30 years old. He started the podcast talking about his CF health, and then he tells us about when and why he decided to speak his truth. Wes lives in Oklahoma. He has two older brothers who do not have cystic fibrosis. He grew up in a religious family. His dad, in the early days, raced greyhounds, and he was a young boy surrounded by hundreds of dogs. Wes now lives in his own house on his mom's ranch, where he is surrounded by 70 cattle, a horse, and a miniature pony. So, Wes, it's great to have you. Like I said in the introduction, it was great to stumble upon you on Facebook, and now we meet in whatever this, you call this in-person meeting sort of is, but it's wonderful to be able to talk to you in person or on Zoom. I want you to tell your story. I briefly kind of gave an outline of your story, but tell us when you were diagnosed and kind of how your health has been up to this year.
So I was born in 1993 and I was diagnosed at 3 years old. It took so long because I didn't have any of the normal symptoms or precursors to cystic fibrosis. And my parents kept taking me to my pediatrician and doing test after test, like there's just something that's not right. And test after test, negative, no. And cystic fibrosis was in the back of the book. It was put on the back burner because I was a very healthy baby. I didn't have any lung issues at the time. It was just all digestion.
But when you say on the back burner, was it put on the back burner by doctors, or were your parents aware of CF?
It was put on the back burner from doctors because normal, as I'm sure you know, a normal child with cystic fibrosis usually has undernourishment or malnourishment. Their color's not all there. They're fighting for oxygen, even though it may not physically appear like they are. I was a happy, chunky little baby that looked as if there was nothing wrong with me. I looked more so healthy as a baby than my brothers did in their pictures. So it was put on the back burner because my pediatrician there's just no way. So it was finally determined to test for cystic fibrosis with the sweat test, and everybody was so dumbfounded because it came back positive. And at that point, my pediatrician here in Ponca City knew of a cystic fibrosis specialist in Oklahoma City, Dr. Reyes, and he has been taking care of me and keeping me alive this whole time, all 30 years. So it wasn't until I was 6 years old that I actually started treatments for cystic fibrosis. That was probably one of my very first memories. I was in my dad's truck. We were driving down the main street in Ponca City, and he was explaining to me that I would have to take some medications by mouth. And these medications would help fight, bacteria or infection. They would give my body a boost, as well as describing what it would be like to take a nebulizer treatment. And at the time, I didn't really think much of it until, you start doing it. And it's kind of, as a kid, you're always thinking, why do I have to do this? Nobody else does. But despite, my parents never let CF control me. In fact, a statement Dr. Reyes, my specialist, gave my parents during that one of the many first consultations was, you can let the disease control you, or you can control the disease. And both my parents had one parent in the medical world. My dad's mom, my grandma, was one of the first female hospital administrators in Oklahoma.
Wow.
And my mom's mom, my Nana in Texas, was a registered nurse with basically the whole alphabet behind her name. And she worked with cystic fibrosis patients. So all of that knowledge, plus the knowledge and research skills that both my parents have, they're very analytical. They went and rented every book. They looked at every article in the library to figure out what this is and how they can combat it. So I had a very normal childhood, and I thank them for that. I thank my family for it. And I really didn't start getting sick until, and I wouldn't really even consider this sick, it was a spontaneous pneumothorax. During my freshman year in high school, I had this sudden pain, and I didn't think much of it because, I've had those kind of pains before. I'd always call them like a stinger, right where your ribs are. And my pain tolerance is so high, I actually went 2.5 months with a collapsed lung before doing anything about it.
Oh my gosh.
And when I went to see my specialist, he just kind of looked at me. He took his glasses off and looked at me. He's like, "You have a collapsed lung." And I was like, "What? What do you mean? What is that?" So he sent us upstairs to 10 West, the penthouse, and to the pediatric floor and fixed that issue. That was my very first hospital stay on the pediatric floor. So a lot of the nurses were like, "Are you new to Oklahoma? Did you just transfer hospitals? You have CF and you're 16. Why are you just now visiting us?" And my parents and I were just kind of like, "What do you mean? This isn't normal?" That's really when I kind of figured out, cystic fibrosis is different and unique in everybody. But if you want to fast forward a little bit, make a super long story kind of shorter. I had another hospital stay in high school for a similar reason, a collapsed lung. My pediatrician at the time, after my former one retired, did a rotation under Dr. Reyes. So Dr. Reyes felt comfortable keeping me here in Ponca City. And from that point on, the rest of my high school years were very healthy. And I graduated and I went to college at Oklahoma State University, where I was majoring in hotel and restaurant administration, which they now changed to hospitality and tourism management. So I graduated in 2016 with that. But before my graduation, I spent quite a few stays in the hospital. And as I'm sure you know, as a mom to kids with CF, if they go in for the hospital for a tune-up, it's at least 2 weeks. So I'm a workaholic, I'm a studyaholic. I don't like letting people down and coming across as if I can't do something. So I would take all my homework, I would take my computer, I would have FaceTime sessions with my professors while they're always just telling me, "We'll worry about it when you get back. We'll worry about it when I get back." And it's like, no, I have to worry about it now, because then when I get back, I'll have to worry about it and the new stuff. So I finally had to buckle down and take less classes, because I definitely wasn't going to give up working as much, because hospitality was my life and I loved it. And I was the manager at the busiest restaurant in Stillwater, so where I went to OSU. So it was just absolutely amazing finding my true calling. So I took a victory lap and a half in college and graduated with honors, which made me feel really good. And I kept on. And then I don't remember the years exactly, but when the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation came out with Orkambi and then Symdeko, or Symdeko, however you prefer to pronounce it, I was on both of those because I have double delta F508 mutations.
Okay.
And both of these medications did wonders for my health. I was able to come off of nighttime oxygen. I was able to basically just sleep and have more energy, be able to do so much more than I was able to before Orkambi. So it was absolutely refreshing to know that these little pills you take twice a day did so much for you at a cellular level. And fast forward to 2019, when the fun stuff started.
Right. A year we'll never forget, right?
Yes, no, 2019 is ingrained in my heart forever and the memories.
Mine too.
Sometimes I wish I could forget some of the memories, the bad ones at least. But in April, I had a week-long cruise in the Caribbean planned. It was myself, a friend, and then two of the regulars at our restaurant who invited us. It was like, you guys have never been on a cruise? Let's go. They're like, you need to experience your first cruise. This is like our 10th. We know what to do, what not to do. Best week of my life. No cell service, cut off from everybody. I just read my book, people watched, had all the food I wanted, and just met some awesome people. I came back that next week on a Saturday, and I didn't have to work until that next Friday, I believe. And that next Friday was Mother's Day weekend, Oklahoma State University's graduation, as well as Stillwater High School's graduation, and a few smaller schools who were graduating around the area. And I woke up Friday morning at 3 a.m. with a weird sensation, a very warm, gurgly sensation. And I sat up in bed and I coughed, or I cleared my throat, and I was coughing up blood. Didn't think much of it because I've done this before, time and time again, Cystic fibrosis, your whole body is inflamed. Your bronchial cords and everything, they're just rubbing together raw. So no big deal. Probably just the adjustment from salt air, which is amazing for my lungs, to Oklahoma dry air, which is not. No worries. Finally got it to stop. Stayed up a little bit, finally went back to sleep. Woke up again at 5 a.m. with an even more warm sensation. Very concerning feeling. And before I could sit up out of bed, I was throwing up blood quite a bit more than I was. Throwing up and coughing. I could not get it to stop. At this time, I just had brand new carpet installed in my house. So I'm like trying to do anything I can not to get blood on this new carpet. That's the me. I'm like, nope. I know it's an emergency, but priorities. I couldn't get it to stop. And the sensation, it was just encoding my whole upper chest. I started getting lightheaded, so I called 911. They took me to Stillwater, the emergency room in Stillwater, and they consulted Dr. Reyes. He wanted me down there ASAP, and my stubborn self, I was not about to pay for an ambulance ride in an hour and a half. So one of my best friends, I called her. I said, hey, you don't work today, do you? She's like, no, I'm off on Fridays. I'm like, great. You want to come take me to Oklahoma City? She said, why? So she came, picked me up from the hospital, took me to Oklahoma City, and stayed with me while I was visiting Dr. Reyes, and he determined that I needed to undergo a bronchial artery embolization, which in layman's terms is microscopic spray foam to spray around the arteries that are bleeding. And they did that by going through my femoral artery up through my heart and into my lungs. The first procedure did not work. Right when I was transported back to my hospital room, I started coughing up blood again.
And just so everyone knows, that's hemoptysis, the coughing up blood, and then that's the procedure you were talking about to take care of that. Yeah.
Yes, I'm sorry. Hemoptysis. Sometimes I remember to mention the medical term, sometimes I don't.
No, we go either way. If you had said hemoptysis, then I would have said that means coughing up blood. Mm-hmm. So I do it both ways because some people know it as one way or the other. So
yeah, okay.
Yeah, all good.
Where was I? So that first procedure did not work. They determined I needed to stay the night in an ICU room. And that whole night I was using suction to get the hemoptysis clots, the blood clots, out of my mouth because they just kept coming all night. And the only thing that was really rattling my brain was, it's Friday and Saturday night in Stillwater. It's OSU's graduation and high school's graduation and Mother's Day weekend. And we have the busiest restaurant. And now it's like double the busyness factor. But that's what I loved about my work family in the company. My health came first. They knew it. Sometimes they even preferred it because they don't want me to get overworked or worked down. So I appreciate that.
That's wonderful.
It was finding a company like that was absolutely amazing. And back to the hospital story, that Sunday I was sent to a normal hospital room, and it was kind of like a God thing. When I got out of the ICU, I was in a little bitty tiny room on 10 East because pediatrics was full, and it was very nerve-wracking to be on a floor that I had no idea who was taking care of me.
How old are you at this time?
I was 26.
Okay.
I was 26 at this time. I actually just turned 26 in April. So this is all new. Nurses, I don't know. Yes, I had the same respiratory therapist because they floated around the whole hospital. But, being up on 10 East for that day and a half, I met some awesome nurses. And one of them, she knew I was going to be in the hospital for a while. She just had that feeling. And I'm glad she did, because she moved us from that tiny room to what used to be an official suite. So it was the size of a double room, plus it had its own sitting area with a futon so my mom could sleep.
Nice.
And not just, on one of those roll-out cots.
Yeah.
And as it turns out, we were up there for 3.5 weeks. And no matter what I did and what I tried, my lungs weren't bouncing back, and the bleeding did not stop. So I did a second embolization procedure, and my humor, after that procedure, I looked at my mom and I was like, Happy Mother's Day. Because it was on Happy Mother's Day, and she said she'll never forget that Mother's Day. But everything started looking up from there. The bleeding had stopped. The only thing right now that I was fighting at the moment was just getting my energy back. I had tons of friends. Some of my nurses would just walk across the unit from 10 West to 10 East and visit me. The administrators, friends, other CF patients would bring me Starbucks or just all those things. So it was great. And then about 2 weeks in the hospital stay, regardless of Dr. Reyes and myself and some of my respiratory therapists trying to wean myself off of oxygen, my lungs just weren't handling it well. I've never experienced my lungs not bouncing back as fast. I've always been in the hospital maybe 5 to 10 days. Okay, more like 5. And then I'm good to go. But, you have to stay in to finish the treatments. And this time I was 2 weeks in and my lungs just weren't working. I was walking at a snail's pace, thinking I was going 10 miles an hour. And I was getting winded. I wasn't getting enough oxygen. I was turning blue. And Dr. Reyes was concerned. I was concerned. Actually, I was more irritated than concerned. My mom was very concerned, but we just prayed. I'd call my Nana and Papa every night. I'd call my Uncle Wes, my mom's brother, and his wife. And I was on many prayer chains from Oklahoma to South Texas, some even in my restaurant community. And then one day, Dr. Reyes came in really early, and I knew something wasn't wrong. I knew something was wrong because he never rounded before noon. He was always, he sees his patients, then on his lunch break, he'd go around in the hospital. So he started coming in about 8 a.m. with his blazer still on, with his briefcase, before he'd even go to his office and get his white coat. So I knew something was wrong. That was definitely unlike his character. So one of these days I'm like, and when I'm sick and feeling like that, I'm not very polite.
Understandably, yeah.
I just sat up in bed crisscross and I was like, what's wrong, Dr. Reyes? You seem like something's on your mind. And he told me, he's like, well, your white blood cell count is really high. That means there's an infection somewhere. We don't know what it is. We can't find it. I'm like, oh, okay, well, whatever. And 3 days later, my lungs were getting worse. And he came in early again and talked to my mom first, which I thought was odd. But then he talked to me. Didn't think much of it. The next day, this was a Tuesday, I had plans for 3 of my fellow managers to come visit me. Dr. Reyes came in and told me that I needed a transplant to survive. And beside themselves, my mom and Dr. Reyes really thought I was going to make a scene, yell, kick, scream, throw stuff. Because at this time, or prior to this time, I was totally against it. I saw so many of my dearest and closest friends battle some hard spells with transplant complications and seeing their families go through that. I didn't want to put my family through that, or myself. But, you can only cough up so much blood and not be able to breathe for so long. And I was like, I just kind of took a deep sigh and looked at him and I was like, fine, let's do it. And that afternoon, I had the consult with Dr. Rolfe, the transplant specialist. And he reminded me so much of my dad because my dad had passed away. And I think that was another God thing that kept me in Oklahoma. Otherwise, I would have gone somewhere else to get transplanted. And Dr. Rolfe was amazing. I was listed in June and received my lungs on August 8th. So just a few days shy of 2 months.
Wow. That was 2019.
Yes, it was 2019. And prior to the lungs that I have now, I was in the hospital for a 2-week stay for minor hemoptysis, just 5 days before I got these lungs. And in that hospital stay, I had 4 offers back to back to back to back. And that was a very interesting feeling because those nights I was super anxious. I was nervous. I wasn't able to sleep. My mind was going. I had this gut feeling. And sure enough, every day, Dr. Rolfe or Dr. Batinsley would come in and say, oh, we had an offer for you. We had an offer. We had an offer. And I appreciate the fact that Dr. Rolfe was very picky because he said the lungs that I have now, he hasn't seen a set of lungs this great or grand in about, I think he said 10 years.
Wow.
So absolutely perfect. The picture comparison of what my lungs look like to these, I was just in shock. Absolutely beautiful. Thank my donor so much for these lungs, whoever he or she or they may be. And after that hospital stay, I spent 18 days in the hospital post-transplant and was able to move home. And my grandparents and my mom lived with me in Stillwater for 3 months. That was the basic
commitment. Yeah.
24-hour supervision. Yeah, the commitment. And
for a transplant. Yeah.
Yes, you have to be under 24/7 observation because if you fall or anything could go bad, you don't want to rip your chest open. And of course, you're just not very strong.
Right.
So my papa would take me to Lowe's and get my steps in, or we'd go to Best Buy or Walmart. And then my Nana and my mom did the grocery shopping because I didn't need to be around that many people for that long. But Papa made sure I got my energy back and my steps in, and Mom and Nana fed me, and Mom was driving back and forth to work. So that 3 months was great. And then I moved back with my mom for a month. And then in 2020, New Year's Day, I moved back alone to myself, with myself, me, myself, and I and my dog to Stillwater. Nice. And that was really hard on my mom, but it was great. And then COVID happened.
And I just have to say before you go to COVID, so what I was saying 2019 was so great for, because here I'm thinking, I didn't realize it was your transplant year and that whole, wonderful thing. But I was thinking, so you had your transplant in August, Trikafta came out in October, 2 months after your transplant.
Yes. So I forgot about that. That was a little frustrating for me.
I would think.
Because I was just like, damn you lungs, why couldn't you hold out a few more months to see if Trikafta worked? But, everything happens for a reason. I'm a very firm believer about that. And not saying maybe sometime soon or in a few years after they fix Trikafta, make it a little better with less symptoms or another medication, I might be able to go on it. Because I don't have issues with my lungs, but I do still have issues with my sinuses. And that's a whole nother story in itself.
Yeah. Well, and just because you have a transplant, you still have CF. It's not like CF went away and you don't have it.
Absolutely. Yes. And there are actually a lot of people who don't understand that. that's probably the main question I get asked still to this day is, so you don't have CF anymore? I'm like, I don't have CF in my lungs.
Right.
I have CF everywhere else, just not in my lungs.
In every organ.
Yeah.
It affects every organ. And now you're also a transplant patient. So on top of the CF, you have transplant medications and all of that as well.
Yes. Switching gears from CF meds to transplant meds was like relearning how to read and write. It was different.
I bet. I mean, it's huge from everyone I've talked to, just huge. And I know you were talking about COVID and CF, and I want to hear about that, but I also want to bring in, so we talk about when were you diagnosed with CF, and you told us that, but I also want to talk about when did you realize you were gay? How old were you? And then what did it take for you to, tell your friends and family?
I probably was 15 or 16 when I knew I was different. Wasn't really sure what that meant at the time, but I could tell I was attracted to men as well. And that wasn't the norm in this small town farmers community that I grew up in, and which is where I'm living now again. So I kept it quiet all through high school. I just acted like, I put up that front, everything was fine and dandy. And the perception of being gay as a whole at that time, from everything I've been exposed to, was negative. People were bullied or harassed or tortured, or they were treated differently, even in the work environment or public in general. So I fought it and I denied it. I lied to myself. I did everything I could to not be that. And that was really hard when I was about 18, 19, just graduating high school, going into college. It really started taking a big mental toll on my health, or a big toll on my mental health, I should say, because it was who I was. It is who I am now. And I realized lying to myself, beating myself down, trying to be the social norm, and trying to be normal, or quote unquote normal, is not okay, because there is no real definition to normal. Your normal is your normal. My normal is mine. My friend's normal is their normal, etc., etc. So the first people I came out to were some of my closest friends I made in college, and then my childhood best friend that I went to school with, pre-K through 12. And, it was nice. Cool. Okay. Yeah. Whatever. Doesn't change. And then I went through a spell where I thought I needed to be normal again. This was later years in college, leading up toward graduation, and a whole lot of, just depression with cystic fibrosis, plus depression with the whole trying to come to terms with I'm gay. But there's a whole lot of gray area in there I don't really remember. So fast forwarding a bit to actually a few years ago, before transplant, I came out to my work family, basically, my closest friends, the girls I managed with, the guys I managed with, some of my servers knew. It's, it's who I was. I didn't really care at that point. The older I got, I realized, you don't have to make everybody happy. It's all about your happiness. And then we can fast forward again to 2020. 2020 is a year of COVID, and that affected me mentally because I just had these new lungs. I couldn't go do anything. I couldn't work. I was about to go back to work full time, and then COVID hit. And then living in Stillwater with a backyard with privacy fence the size of nothing, it was kind of determined. It's like, let's sell the house and I'll move back to my home place. My mom gave me some land to build on, and everything will be fine and dandy. And, it has, but not being able to work for 3 years really hurt because I was going to use this as, okay, I can go out and be my true self. I can meet people. I can be the gay me. That didn't happen. More depression and more mental strain until in 2021, I met somebody and he helped me realize, and he ultimately helped me come out to my family because we connected on such a sincere level. And although we aren't close anymore, I know I can for sure say that I learned so much from him, because coming out to my family was absolutely devastatingly difficult because very religious. My family is very tight and close knit on my mom's side. And one of my biggest fears was coming to terms with, if they don't react positively to this, am I an outcast? Our holidays and get together is going to be awkward. What's it going to be like? But Jace assured me that everything I told him about my grandparents and my family, they're going to accept me for who I am. And they did. And everybody in the family is 110-fold supportive of me. It was kind of funny when I officially told my mom. So you have to keep in mind, right now we're living together while my house is being built. And whoever decided to build a house in COVID, me, not the smartest idea. It's taken a lot longer. So when I told her, half the time she's mom and half the time she's Vanna, because I'm a grown man. We get along very well, but we grind each other's gears sometimes. And when I told her I was gay, she kind of started hysterically, like frustratingly crying, mad. And I'm like, why are you mad? She's like, I don't know, because I just always thought you were, but I was just going to let it just see how it played out. And I'm like, again, Vanna, why are you mad? And it ended up not being anything, but it was just one of those things because she's a mom. She worried about my safety and am I going to be judged? And as a parent, you don't want your kids to be judged and treated differently. But, it's one of those talks. It's like, Mom, you know me. I'm not going to put up with anybody's slack.
And how sad. I know things are getting better, but how... And your family sounds wonderful. And I'm so glad they accepted everything, as you told them. But yeah, none of it is anybody's business. And I just think it's so, and no one else has to explain themselves. I don't have to explain myself because I'm not gay. So it's just so frustrating to see, but I'm so glad that things are getting so much better. My mom did not come out until she was in her 50s because obviously she's much older than you. She's 83 now. And there was such a stigma to it, and she sobbed when it was before I was getting married to my husband. And I said, Mom, I don't care. I just want you to live your life, live your best life, like live your truth. Just tell me. And she sobbed and sobbed, and she said, I'm just so afraid to be hated by my kids and by the community. And I thought, no, I just want to, is Natalie going to be my stepmom? Is she going to be the grandmother to our kids? Like, we just want to know what to call her.
Yeah.
We're fine. And like, after that day, everything was great. But that burden that she carried for so long. And again, things were so much different when she was growing up.
Oh, I can not even imagine.
And she had 3 kids and then left my dad, So how do you feel now in the world? Do you feel more accepted now that you've been able to speak your truth?
I definitely feel like the elephant is off my back. I don't walk around feeling paranoid or why is that person looking at me? Do they think I'm gay or am I giving gay vibes? Just kind of those things that run through your head as a newly coming out individual. And I mean, that's something my counselor and we've talked about. It's like, just because you think this in your head, that is not why they're looking at you. It's like, oh, he has nice shoes, or oh, he has pretty teeth, or I wonder where he got his clothes at. Just all these things. But it's our minds. Our minds are kind of our worst enemy.
Mm-hmm.
And in today's society, you know, I feel like it's easier in a way to come out now because I've seen statistics and the amount of LGBTQ plus individuals now versus 5-10 years ago is so much more.
Yeah, I mean, I just think more people are able and willing to live their truth and are being accepted, right?
Yes.
You know, it's just awareness is raised. Yeah.
That's why after transplant, or while I was waiting for transplant, I made it a promise to myself. It's like, you know what? If I get these lungs, I get the call, I make it through the transplant surgery, I make it past the first year of transplant because that is the most crucial.
Mm-hmm.
I will live a life that is true to me. I will live my best and true self. And I did that. So after that first year, I was able to realize who I am both mentally and personally, and utilize that to help others in the cystic fibrosis community. And I have. And even though I never thought I would be able to or had intentions to, it's a very warming aspect to be able to have people reach out to you and like, hey, how did you do this? How did you overcome that?
Yeah, when that post went up on, I think the CF Foundation put it out, right?
Yes.
When that post went up, you must have, because I was like, oh, Wes, I have to talk to him. And then I reached out to you. You must have had so many people contacting you.
It took me 3 days to go through all of my Instagram messages, Facebook messages, the comments, the tags. I was at work that day, so my phone is just going off and off. And every second I get, I'm like, what is it? And I'm like, oh my gosh, I got contacted by you. I'm doing a Facebook Live interview on Saturday. I believe there's another podcast that reached out. UNOS, United Network of Organ Sharing, reached out. They wanted to share my story.
Wow.
And ask if I would be a UNOS ambassador. And that's just all additional to what I already am with the cystic fibrosis community, as well as Life Share of Oklahoma and National Donate Life. It's very humbling to realize that just something you choose to do every day is seen as a big impact, if that's the correct way to put it.
Mm-hmm.
Because, I mean, I've just always lived my life with CF the best and the fullest and the truthfulest now. Truthfulness? Is that a word?
Truthful. You just made it a word.
I did. The most true, because I knew that's what's right. I mean, with all due respect, I understand everybody has their battles, especially with a CF, but I wasn't going to let it control me. I mean, at the time, I only thought I had one chance at life, and I was going to do my best and give it my all to have the best life possible, no matter if I live to be 6, 10, 12, 18, 24. Now I turn 30 next year. And now with a second chance at life, I am 3 years post-transplant in August, and I'm still making a difference and an impact. To me, it's like, wow, people really like my story. And then again, it's like, wow, people really like my story. That's just my life.
They like you. Yeah.
I guess so.
Absolutely. And I think, too, when I saw it, I was, obviously, I know other people in the CF community that are gay, and some are very open about it, and some are not. And it's up to each person to decide how they want to, display who they are, right?
Absolutely.
But I think with you, it was the story of realizing that you had to live your truth, and the relationship to CF and that transplant, and realizing how you wanted to live your life. And that was so powerful when I read it, that's another reason of why I have to talk to this guy, because you're changing people's lives, you're changing how people think about things and how you wanted to live your own life. Like, all of us can take advice from this, whether we're gay or whether we're straight or whether we have CF or not. How are we living our life? Are we living our own truth?
Absolutely.
And I thought that was a big thing just from what you had written on that Facebook post.
Yeah. And I know so many people who they're stuck in a routine and they're living their life, but they even say themselves that they're not happy with it, whatever it may be. It may be their job or the car they drive or the time they have to get up, or that there's not enough hours in the day. And I've seen that. I've heard of it, and I didn't want to live that way. So after transplant, I made sure I wasn't going to take advantage of my donor in this new life, but I was also going to use it as an advantage to live my true self, live my best life, and technically or rationally, no matter the cost. So, yes, I'm still Wes. I'm still Wes with CF. I'm still the rancher that knows how to work cattle and horses and all that jazz. But I'm also a city boy that loves socializing and loves restaurants and likes making people happy at the end of the day, and writing and speaking and advocating. And like something my counselor said, it's like, nobody sees you as gay. A gay is just part of you. It's like you're Wes, and this small little sliver of Wes is that he's gay. Doesn't define him. And if it does, those people don't deserve you in their lives. And the people who have reached out to me in the CF community who are gay, kind of going back on what you just said, some of them prefer not to be fully out about it, or they do to just a select few. That's one of the main things that they've asked me is, how did you find the courage or the comfortability to come out and be proud and let your family know and live your best life? And I said, honestly, it all boils down to you. It boils down to what you want. You can't constantly look at what your parents or your aunts and uncles or your friends or your boss, your employer, your coworkers want. If they don't accept you, then they're obviously not the best and true people that you need in your life. And thankfully, I haven't ran into that yet, but I know there are a lot of people who have. And sharing my story in a world now where it's a little bit easier to identify as LGBTQ plus in that community, we're not a minority anymore. People are realizing that they can be them true selves and being happy and proud and prideful. A lot of people are coming to terms to that a lot sooner. They're not suffering from a lot of mental anguish as I'd say we were probably 10 years ago.
Absolutely. And I think too, and please correct me if you think I'm wrong, but you have two things. Like, I know it's not in the same, they're not parallel, but you have to decide, do you want to share that you have CF? And then, do you want to share if you're gay? So there were two things. Are you pretty open about having CF with people, or do only just your closest friends know?
No, anybody and everybody that knows who Wes Hawkins is knows that I have a genetic disease. I have CF. I had a lung transplant, and that I'm gay. So, I don't hide things anymore. I've been an advocate with the CF Foundation since I was a child. So, especially in our small town of Ponca City, my mom and dad were business people. So my dad had the busiest real estate company, and he was born and raised here. They were in that social circle, so everybody knew me. I've had articles, newspapers, events, just all kinds of things. And at the time, I was just like, whoa, take a step back. And now I realize, it's all for the common good. Okay, so I'm working at Starbucks now because I couldn't go back to Texas Roadhouse because the exposure risk after having a transplant with the world of COVID. So I had to find a smaller concept if I was going to be able to stay in the hospitality industry. And I'm just working one day and I walk up front by the register and a customer is getting her order taken. And she's like, whoa, hey, you're Wes, right? And I'm like covering my name tag. I'm like, why? Who wants to know? And it's like, I saw you on the news. And I'm like, you saw me what? I'm like, say that again. Because I was featured on a Tulsa channel news for the kind of a similar story.
Okay.
And LifeShare also sent out a press release and it was picked up by a news app called Newsbreak. And I was just like in awe. I was like, what? This is so cool, but so weird. But it's very interesting when, you get stopped. And I've been stopped a few times over the years, like, hey, you're that kid, right? And I'm like, I don't know which kid. But go ahead.
I was just going to say, you're an assistant manager, right?
Yes, I'm an assistant store manager at Starbucks, getting to utilize my management skills. And I've only been with Starbucks about 4 months, so that's very humbling in itself. I was at Texas Roadhouse for 8 years, and then COVID hit. Didn't work for 2.5, and not being able to work really affected my mental health because I'm not a kind of person to sit around and not do anything. I mean, yes, it's nice, but not for 2.5 years.
Yeah, that's a long time.
Being on the home place, the ranch, there's cattle, there's mowing, brush hogging, spraying weeds, lots of stuff to do, but it's not what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. And being back in hospitality has definitely made a difference.
Wonderful. And as we wrap up, so tell us a couple of things, like what do you see as your future? Like kind of where do you want to end up? Who do you hope you meet? And do you have any pets?
I do have one dog. He's a rescue. His name's Jasper. I rescued him 8 years ago from a puppy mill. He's a Jack Russell Chihuahua mix. I call him Sir Japs a lot sometimes because when he walks around, he prances kind of like a Clydesdale.
Cute.
So he's very bougie, other than the cattle and the horses we have. In, like, say, 5 years, I would love, I understand everything happens for a reason. And if things do happen, they do. If they don't, they also don't. But I would like to, find somebody I could settle down with. Somebody that enjoys the outdoors like I do, being on a ranch, but also enjoying city life as well. I don't remember what else you asked.
Just kind of where you want to be work-wise?
Work-wise, I would absolutely love to be the store manager of a Starbucks because Starbucks is a huge company that promotes within itself. If they see potential in you, and they've already done that once with me, which I'm super proud of. And my district manager and my SM are amazing. So, I just want to keep moving up from there. And they're a huge, I don't know if you know anything about Starbucks, but they are absolutely very inclusive, especially with the LGBTQ plus community.
Wonderful.
So it's definitely a safe place. And working at a corporate company that is so accepting is just amazing.
That is amazing. We have one not far from my house here. And you just drive on up. I like the vanilla chai and
yes,
like so many things. What's your favorite Starbucks drink?
My favorite drink would probably be the brown sugar shaken espresso, but I would substitute the oat milk for vanilla sweet cream if I really want something thick and sweet. Otherwise, any Starbucks drink, I usually get oat milk. I just like the taste of it. But yeah, even though it is a thick, sweet drink, if you get sweet cream in it, it's very refreshing in a way. But also, as of today, we just launched our Summer 2 promo set, and that includes the Paradise drink, which is pineapple passion fruit.
Yum.
And you can get it with water coconut milk or lemonade. And with coconut milk, it tastes like a pina colada. It's amazing.
Wow. Oh, it sounds yummy. I'm so glad you're loving your job. And
yes,
I guess we'll wrap up not only just on wonderful drinks, but what do you want people to take away from this, or how do you want them to be inspired by your story and by you?
Basically, just know that if you're experiencing downs or you're plateaued in life or you're stuck, it can always get better. You may not understand how, when, or why, but it will. It did for me when I was at my worst, and I didn't think I was going to survive. and I was able to survive, and now I'm thriving. And that is huge. I believe everybody should be able to survive. Well, not only survive, but thrive. And if you have any doubts or insecurities about whether it's, what your happiness is or what you're unhappy about, or even just an individual struggling to come out as being accepting in the LGBTQ plus community, just reach out. I'm sure everybody knows somebody. And I have those people that I was able to ask and reach out to for advice and assistance, and just having a strong support system, it can make it, break it. And for me, my support system is, let's just put it this way, I don't think I would be here or as strong-minded as I am today without the backing of my support system. And that's all over the country. That's not just here in Oklahoma.
Well, we're so glad that you shared your story and that you're living your truth and that you're on the other side of both the transplant and coming out to your family and friends.
Yes.
And
talk about a huge sigh of relief.
Well, thanks, Wes, for sharing your story with us.
Yeah, thank you, Laura. I greatly appreciate the opportunity.
We're so grateful. Thank you. The original music in this podcast is performed by Kevin Allen.
It's not complicated.
Who happens to have cystic fibrosis.
We all got our worries and fears. I know it's got you frustrated, but loving you is so alright.
This has been the Living with Cystic Fibrosis podcast. For more information and to learn more about the Bonnell Foundation, visit our website at thebonnellfoundation.org. That's the BONNELL Foundation.org. This podcast was sponsored by Viatris and Genentech. It was produced by Jag and Detroit Podcasts. Follow our show in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you're listening right now.